Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This week I decided to make sort of a video essay type video about the attention economy. I'm going to be talking about how it affects the news, how it affects social media, and how it affects our own psychology. So that being said, I'll give a quick definition and then jump right into the video. The term attention economy refers to the societal shift from manufactured goods-based production to the management of information. This shift is especially apparent with the growth of our digital age, where much of production deals with social media advertising, paid online courses, and curation services such as Netflix and other streaming sites, where we're essentially paying for a company to sift through the vast amount of information out there to find what will suit both individual and mass tastes. Because we live in a digital age where the abundance of information is easier to access than ever before and is constantly growing, media content outnumbers the available audience, making attention a scarce resource. Human time and attention, more than ever before, is the main resource capitalists and entrepreneurs are utilizing in order to propel their businesses forward and earn their money.
Your organization is terrible.
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization is terrible. You are fake news.
Sir.
One way our recent attention economy has affected society is in regards to world news. Never before have we had such instant access not only to what is going on in our own country, but to what's going on around the world. We've all heard before about how the news focuses on negativity and disaster to keep our attention, while the good parts typically consist of useless fluff we can consume and forget in the amount of time it takes to read a listicle. Now, of course, I don't think there's anything wrong with being informed of global tragedies or what's going on around the world. That could be very important. But given the amount of access that we get nowadays versus in the past where we're more focused on individual communities or just our own country, it can be very overwhelming and people do get addicted to the news and it does affect our mental health. It can be very addicting to stay glued to tragedies that are completely out of our control and just feel completely powerless to it, while at the same time just trying to get more and more information to have some sense of control over the environment, even if it's just in our own heads. And then another way that this affects us is kind of that information overload and paralysis that occurs from it can sometimes prevent us from taking actual useful action. Like instead of going out and reshaping our communities or having a fundraiser or something, instead we're just kind of stuck to our chairs feeling helpless as we see all this horrible stuff going on. And then our information age and the constant media scramble for attention also leads to a change in politics and the news in general. With the increased emphasis on grabbing our attention, politics becomes even more of a spectacle rather than a complex web of nuanced ideas and constructive debate. We saw this in 2016 with the insane amount of screen time Trump got over other candidates, due to both his charisma and outrageous claims.
We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for the wall.
While at the beginning of the race, we saw the majority of Republicans either denounce Trump or see him as a joke, the attention he generated from his antics led to constant televisation and a way deep into the psyches of everyone with access to a screen. His ultimate propellant to the top also represented, perhaps most profoundly to this date, a shift in politics being viewed as a sector dominated by the elites requiring intentional and complex understanding to a more populist and spectacular form. While Trump is in no way the first populist leader of a nation, he has garnered more digital attention than anybody else in history, simply because we've never had our phone in our pocket. We've never had access to everything immediately. We've never been more online or having more screen time than ever before. And we can contrast the idea of Trump gaining popularity due to the insane amount of media time he had with another populist leader, Bernie Sanders. So in Sanders' run in 2016, he received pretty much the same amount of support as Trump did, just on the other side. People were very enthused about Sanders. He had a lot of clear, concise ideas, and just like Trump, he was deemed as an outsider coming in, even though Sanders obviously has a long history of politics. But instead of Bernie getting the bulk of media time on the left or the Democratic Party, instead it went over to Hillary Clinton, which coincidentally is notorious for being terrible online. With her whole email scandal, she failed to cover up, and then the whole chillin' in Cedar Rapids thing.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
Her inability to connect to people through the media was a serious detriment, and giving her more televised time than Bernie, I think, really had a large outcome on the polling numbers. I also want to mention that I think a large reason why Bernie was denied screen time from the Democratic Party is because his economic policies would upset the status quo even more than Trump has, and a lot of Democratic shareholders would lose stakes if he were to be elected. So it's kind of, skeevy, but I think, that's kind of what happened. In addition, once Trump received enough attention and support to win the presidency, he has, to the surprise of many outside his fan base, been able to maintain his support despite being caught up in multiple lies and having grandiose and unrealistic ideas for the future. This is, in part, due to factors such as confirmation bias, where people choose to take any successes or successful sounding claims as evidence that they made the right choice and reject any information that says otherwise. But I think it's also due to the fact that it's a lot easier to just believe in a trusted authority and brush over all their flaws instead of doing all the work yourself of sifting through information to come up with your own ideas. Our attention is very limited, so we don't really have time to mull over these ideas to their full extent, especially, with everything else trying to grab our attention with work and social media and all that I think it's easier to just believe whatever news source of your choosing is telling you, since they are supposed to be trusted authorities after all, and then just leave it at that. We also see information overload leading to poorer decisions, and the amount of differing viewpoints in the news and media is overwhelming, with both sides attempting to push their agendas in the most digestible forms possible for easy access. Rather than adding constructively to debate and, analyzing both sides, most media outlets are just trying to get your attention and your clicks and your views as quick as possible, so they just form their headlines based on their own brand and try to suck you in that way. We see this on social media platforms such as Facebook, where it has been shown that once an app knows your politics, they cater ads and headlines they know you'll agree with and remove those they believe you won't. This is referred to as selective exposure, and its optimization makes sense in an economy that profits off of attention in the form of clicks and watch time. And so that leads us into part 2 of this video, social media. We all know that social media is designed to divert your attention and suck your time. But keeping on the topic of politics for a second, we also see it in its oftentimes most cringeworthy and exhausting formats, Twitter feuds. Now, I'm not on Twitter yet because, number one, I still respect my mental health, and number two, I don't have to for my job or anything like that. But, that platform spills over into other social medias and especially into daily conversation. So I wanted to first, tackle Twitter. Twitter is perhaps the best example of how our attention economy affects sociability and the spread of information. The fact that it is a text-based social format with limited character counts leads to it being a mainly reactionary platform in a way that other social medias, for example Instagram, are not, as Instagram typically requires a bit more curation before posting on the user's side. On Twitter, the more outrageous the claim, the better, with thousands of people retweeting and commenting into a never-ending echo chamber. In addition to this, oftentimes unimportant and abstracted political messages gain significant traction, and any discerning opinion or commentary is quickly torn down with cancel culture rampant. In this sense, it can be seen as a platform not for constructive political discourse and criticism, but a view into current PC trends for people to conform to out of fear of losing their social inclusion. Now, this isn't to say that constructive political dialogue or activism doesn't ever arise from Twitter, because that's not true. It has in the past, and I'm sure it will again. We saw this most clearly in 2014, I want to say, during the whole Black Lives Matter thing. A lot of the brutality going on was obviously not put on the mainstream media, on TV channels and stuff like that, but on Twitter, people were sharing and talking about these issues. And without that sort of grassroots activism through this social media platform, a lot of that attention would go unnoticed and things would just be brushed over. So it has obviously helped in the past. But on the whole, Twitter and politics within Twitter tends to focus on small microcosms of issues rather than the big picture. This is clearly because of the small character count and the fact that it's a reactionary platform. And then it's a small tangent, but I swear it's related. You'll see in a second. I was reading this right before I filmed, and I was like, dude, I gotta read this page real quick because it kind of highlights some of what I'm talking about. In the early days of Twitter, a platform in which users are supposed to compete for followers and through which lagging careers can instantly be boosted through the correct virtue signaling, minor celebrities realized that one could attract a following greater than through traditional media. At first, self-righteously or snarkily denouncing others for racism, sexism, or homophobia was the most instantaneous and certain way to achieve social media fame. Something about public social media platforms, it turned out, was conducive to the vanity of morally righteous politics and the irresistible draw of the culture wars. But soon the secret was out and everybody was doing it. The value of the currency of virtue that those who had made their social media cultural capital on was in danger of being suddenly devalued. As a result, I believe, a culture of purging had to take place, largely targeting those in competition for this precious currency. Thus, the attacks increasingly focused on other liberals and leftists, often with seemingly pristine progressive credentials, instead of those who engaged in any actual racism, sexism, or homophobia. And then she goes on to give an example of this at the Orlando, Florida shooting. I'm going to put that up on the screen if you want to pause and read it. It's a really good read. Otherwise, I'm going to move on for the sake of time. So she talks about how people use the Orlando shooting to kind of bring up other topics such as Wounded Knee or using gender neutral words for like Latinx people, which are important conversations to have, but when you're getting mad at people who are mourning a really horrible thing that happened and trying to redirect it to your own political cause, number one, it's insensitive, but number two, it just kind of It comes across as you're vying for this extra attention, you're trying to make yourself seem more righteous than everybody else, and it's just a real problem with the whole Twitter culture. Like, you know, you see it constantly. And then the whole idea of virtue being a scarcity and people canceling others to try to, you know, stack up more of that virtue for themselves, I think is just a really interesting topic. And if you want to read more, I highly suggest it. Not sponsored, obviously, but, you know, read up. We also see the attention economy in full effect on other social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. While many use these apps to stay connected socially with people they no longer live near or for entertainment, it also has a place in society in a monetary sense. Instagram influencers get paid exorbitant amounts of money for brand deals and promotions that is completely based off the amount of followers and attention they are generating from their content. In addition, Facebook and YouTube make money off of ad revenue dependent on how much of their audience's attention they can consume each day. The speed at which influencers come and go in relevance, especially combined with cancel culture, results in fleeting fame incongruence with our decreasing attention spans. The rise in influencers who gain their fame from superficial aspects of themselves also highlights how attention in and of itself is often the main goal in our fast-paced world. What matters is if you make it, rather than what you do to get there or the legacy you leave behind. Attention comes and goes with the snap of a finger, leaving people desperate to regain their 15 minutes in the spotlight. Existing in a landscape where media outlets and advertisements are constantly vying for our attention, we experience a shift in our individual psyches and mental behavior. Information overload often leads to a loss of trust in our own ideas, as we are constantly bombarded with differing viewpoints or an echo chamber of a few specific ones that put us in social danger to reject or criticize. This lack of trust, in turn, leads to an overdependence on external information and validation in order to sort of regulate our own ideas, especially in terms of cancel culture, where, you know, if you don't have the right ideas, you could just be a social outcast. And because people use the internet to document their life, whether it's parents posting photos of their baby or people posting graduation photos or whatever, if you're not online and you know that everybody else is like getting validation and documentation from what they put on there, it can kind of make you feel like you don't exist. Like the digital world and the physical world more and more is just becoming combined, almost to a degree where the real world doesn't even feel like the real world. Like we see this with people fretting, like going on a nice hike and then fretting over not getting a good picture of themselves at the top of the mountain, and it like sours the rest of their day, which is like so bizarre, because aren't you hiking just because it's nice to hike? It's a bizarre world out there. I don't know what to say. And then of course one of the most obvious ways the attention economy affects us is in terms of attention span, which, you know, I'm not trying to sound like a boomer or anything, but our attention spans definitely are decreasing. I've noticed it in myself. I think most people who remember what life was like before social media have definitely noticed a shift. When every single media outlet is just trying to grab your attention and every app on your phone is trying to grab your attention, we become used to that constant like gratification and like entertainment. It becomes more difficult to engage in long-term forms of entertainment. Like for example, my Netflix queue is made up entirely of like 2+ hour movies that I just feel like I don't have the patience to watch in their entirety. And then I also think the most worrisome aspect of having a shorter attention span as a result of the attention economy is that it makes it harder for us to engage in deep thought within our own minds and in conversation with others. You have to intentionally pull yourself away from screens to like go on hikes and clear your mind, or to, you know, call someone on the phone and have like a real conversation. It just gets harder when you're used to having constant entertainment in your hand. And then something I noticed too that's the most worrisome for me is like, even in moments of nothingness, like not even boredom, just like nothingness, instead of letting thoughts naturally arise in my brain like I would if I was like meditating or something, instead I just instinctively reach for my phone and scroll through social media, and I enter that sort of like brain fog space where you're not fully in the present world, but you're not fully in the digital world either. You're just kind of scrolling. And the reason I think that's a problem is because in those times of nothingness, I think that's when like creativity kind of comes about. That's when you can kind of more consciously direct your actions. But if you're just used to automatically reaching for like some digital object, then it just kind of becomes a waste of time. But it's not even just like on your phones. Like, you know, at the gas station you go and it's like 2 minutes to pump your gas, but instead of it just being quiet, it's like they have advertisements playing. And then since video streaming sites curate what to watch based on what we've watched before, we get used to like having them entertain us and having them pick what we want to watch, which makes it more difficult for us to entertain ourselves, which I think is the most valuable thing you could learn how to do. But it also makes us complacent with whatever we get because we're used to like relying on them for that entertainment. And if we don't find anything that we want to watch, we could just watch The Office for the 8th time in a row and feel absolutely fine. And then because YouTube and other platforms curate the recommended based on like what you've watched in the past, it really narrows down what you're exposed to, and I think it can actually break down your own personal taste because you're not doing things that like come out of you and that you're naturally interested in. It's what some sort of corporation is telling you to watch. So those are just a couple of my thoughts on how the attention economy is affecting us here in 2020, here in this decade, the upcoming years. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you watched to the end, please hit the subscribe button or leave a comment down below what you agreed with, what you didn't. Start a fight, I don't care. I love to hear it, so just let me know, and I will see you guys next time.